Welcome everyone to Radicalized Truth Survives, where we always have your back. My name is Heidi Cuda. I am here with Stewartson and High Fidelity, Disinformation Sleuths, and that beautiful opener you just saw, courtesy of our partner Sean Connor. We're going to be talking a lot about active measures today, Kremlin propaganda, and how it's delivered by tech billionaires, the fossil fuel industry, churchy operatives, and yes, sometimes young people named Charlie Kirk. So we have a really cool episode coming up that's going to focus on Turning Point USA. We have an amazing interview with the one of the first professors blacklisted by TPUSA, Professor Matthew Bodie from Georgia. He has been a one-man army focusing on Charlie Kirk and everything that he says and does. And so he's going to be unpacking all of that for us because we have a multiple major ops happening on college campuses, and they're growing very fast. So we're very, very excited about that. And of course, Council for National Policy will also factor into our conversation. All right, guys, everybody okay today? Ready to go?
Ready to go?
You guys cool? All right, let's jump into front loaded.
Front loaded.
Okay, so every week I ask a lot of you guys, I ask you to please read something or please pay attention to something. Well, I am going to beseech you to please read my latest report in Byline Media, Byline Supplement. That is the team out of Byline Times that I'm a part of out of the UK with a couple people, myself and my friend Matt in America reporting. And this piece right here basically shows Musk turning Twitter into a Russian information warfare outlet under the guise of a social media platform. But I also investigated the history of communication platforms as they're weaponized and or dismantled. And I show you how Hungary does it and how Russia does it and how it's been done in the Philippines and how we've seen it in America. So I please ask you to look at that. If you can, like and support it. If you can go even further and become a subscriber, that'd be amazing. We take on billionaires without fear, and we need the help because everything we do is reader and viewer funded. So this really cool guy, Jim Stewartson, is quoted in that particular story. So look for that too. Literally, Hi-Fi helped me pluck out something that Jim said a week ago or so in Hellscape that worked perfectly for this report. So, guys,
glad to be of service. Yeah, I'm gonna be talking about Musk. There is, I don't know if you saw overnight, but Musk went all the way to QAnon.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
He said, "My pronouns are prosecute Fauci."
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Which
medical
is
freedom,
which is transphobic and anti-vax and just pure, QAnon Gamergate targeting.
Yeah.
In 5 fucking words.
Yeah.
I have a new name for him, which is QAnon.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
I was wondering about that. I thought it was Kelon, but I wasn't sure.
No, I love that.
QAnon.
No,
It's like QAnon, but QAnon.
Ooh, QAnon. Okay, now I get it. Nice.
It's important.
QAnon
it's important.
I'm going with that.
Why it's so important is that none of this is cute or funny. These are all professional
it's really
propaganda.
Fucking not funny.
These are propagandist moves.
A million likes on that goddamn thing.
Yeah. So, and it's putting real people who do good work lives at risk, and it's also sending out dog whistles to people who already are, part of the woo anti-science community. And so there's a lot that's accomplished in that. And one of the things I'm very grateful for is this show that we have. We interview week after week experts, but between Jason Stanley and the professor we have coming up, they study rhetoric. So they understand the weaponization of words probably better than anybody. And that's why they're able to really pinpoint how these words are being used to hack our brains. And we're just so glad you guys are here with us because we are really trying to be what Professor Boedy said is the kind of the antidote to this stuff. We are among the folks that are trying to punch through it and and punch up. So, okay. Speaking of which, yeah, I know. Uh, Speaking of which, I want to go to my
With my technique.
archives. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do. So
that's from
scary.
rockin' robots in
So
the 70s.
scary.
Rock'em
So
Sock'em Robots,
scary.
yeah.
And speaking of retro toys, I want to take a look at my archives real quick. Our dear RadPod friend Shar Norris and I wrote a piece more than a year ago about who is funding the school board attacks. And that piece also referenced Turning Point USA, which is going to be a theme of this episode. The fastest growing, a youth organization on campus because of money. So we break down how these, the school board attacks and these Turning Point USA chapters, they're very well financed. And again, we're going to be talking more about that. We're going to be talking about the Council for National Policy. We're going to be talking about fossil fuel interests in trying to actually target young minds away from science. And for the young people who watch our show, you guys and your belief in science is what's going to save the world. So that's why we try to expose this stuff. Just a quick shout out to those who are supporting me on my Substack. I want to thank you guys so much. You're making it possible for me to write full time, which brings me great joy. And speaking of great joy, yeah, that's a really good one. Mike Judge and I did not know how to roll a joint, and we had to go to a YouTube tutorial to figure that out.
That is some funny shit. Right? I'm sorry.
Well,
that's funny.
Well, part of it is that he doesn't smoke. And at the time when I did, joints were above my kin. I'm a poor writer. I required a bong hit back in the day. So anyway, that's a funny story.
What fucking year is it that you needed to do that?
That was, I think, 2014 or 2015. Yeah.
What?
Hold on. You were like at least in your late 30s, early 40s at this point in time, and
No,
you didn't.
It was probably, I would say, probably 50-ish. Yeah, late 40s, early 50s.
Even worse, you didn't know how to.
No, it was funny, but Mike had the sense to actually go to a YouTube tutorial, and we figured it out. We use the two paper novice trick. If you have two pieces of paper, it makes it easier. Anyway, that is the kind of stuff that you're getting on Betty Dangerous' Substack. It's very fun. But the reason I really wanted to point that out is because I'm wearing a Mavis Staples t-shirt. That is what I'm going to be writing about the second we're done recording today. The reason I'm bringing this up, Mavis Staples, her family their music was very pivotal in the civil rights movement. Her father was close with Martin Luther King Jr. And I saw Mavis Staples perform at the Segerstrom Center in Orange County Friday night, thanks to my friend who's best friends with the bass player, which is always a big theme of my life. I just want to say that this woman took 6 years of pain right away from me. Like, she completely made the pain of this war and all this hate and all this disinformation evaporate, because every song she sang was a song about healing and love and taking action against hate. And this woman, who is 83 years old, is a national treasure. And I want everybody to immediately, if you don't know Mavis Staples, go download her entire archive, go download her family archive, and know that this war that we're in, this pitting people against each other, is not real, and that what is real is doing the work of bringing people together. And that's what she does with that music. So those of us who do the work of battling disinformation and exposing the people behind it, we are warriors, and we sometimes, I think, I know I do, forget that we also need healing, and you can find healing in music. And Mavis talked about that. She said without music, she would really be sad a lot of the time. So I encourage everybody in this fight to do whatever they have to do to practice self-care. And for me, self-care is writing and listening to Mavis Staples.
I mean, just psychologically, if you find something that moves you and takes you to a different place, right? Being in a different place than where you are right now sometimes is a good thing, right? And that's a healthy way to do it.
Right. That's right.
you know, it's it's the artistic, voluntary way of changing your mood as opposed
Yes.
to the, corrosive, coercive way that, so much of it happens.
Yes, right,
I
right.
agree.
I literally like walked in from the first growl, from the first note, tears
No,
the whole
she's
time.
a fucking badass, man. There's
Cheers
no,
the whole time, dancing in
yeah.
the aisle. I was like cleansed. I was like, this is it. This is it. And so yeah, she'll take you there. She'll take you there. All
Well
right,
done.
guys.
Well done.
Thank you. Let's get on to word phrase of the week.
Word phrase of the week this week. I'm going to kind of go with a heady one because I think it's an important concept that people need to understand. It is pluralistic ignorance. And what is
Oh, shit.
pluralistic ignorance? I know this is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Pluralistic ignorance is when the viewpoint of the minority is wrongly perceived to be the majority position, and when the majority position is considered to be in the minority. Why this is important, why people need to know this word phrase, is because right now what we are seeing with Elon Musk and his distortion of social media, what we have seen throughout Trump's campaign, what we have seen throughout this constant beating of drums for civil war in this country, is that the people who are making this noise are a very small minority of this country,
That's right.
a third. Right? Except everyone is so scared of them because they are so loud, because they think they might just be the majority. I am here to tell you they are not, and that is why you must not fear pluralistic ignorance.
Well, one example of how they think about it is the 3%ers, right? The 3%ers are named that because they believe it only takes 3% of the country to enact a revolution. That's the entire point. That it was only 3% of the Americans that revolted against the British, and therefore a minority can enact a revolution. That's sort of the when you take that idea all the way to the end, that's where you get.
Yeah. And the only problem I have is that right now we have a minority around the country who are attacking power substations in, North Carolina, South Carolina, Oregon. And what they're going to
That's the
find
whole
out
thing.
is, yeah, well, what they're going to find out is the majority does have a big stick if they choose to wield it. And here's hoping our DOJ does choose to wield it, because I think the majority will in this country is that's enough of this crap.
Absolutely. And I will also like to add to that, and I can't impart this enough. And I think, I don't know if women are more impacted by this than men. I feel like we are. This is so not the time to be silent and be afraid and be told by an employer that you can't publicly say what you think about somebody like Musk, who's basically trying to hack millions of people's brains. Silence is what gets us genocide. So
Yeah.
for me, we need people to step up and be loud. I get it if you can't be loud because you maybe have a bureaucratic position or whatever, but then you've got a job. So support people who are doing the work of democracy, because it's all hands on deck time. It's
Yeah.
beyond that.
I'm going to be talking about the premier example of pluralistic ignorance. That's exactly what Musk is doing, right? Is trying to make it seem like his minority, weird ass QAnon ideology is the majority, is the center. He's trying to move the entire Overton window all the way to Nazis.
My concern is he's doing it, Jim. That's
He,
my concern.
he is literally doing it, and we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about a piece in which I describe how he's turning it into a chant.
Which is why once again, I'm going to tell everybody to listen to Mavis Staples. She's selling hats that say Mavis for president. She's selling buttons that say Mavis for president. We need people who can cut through that shit. These are false realities that they're creating.
Fuck, I'd vote for Mavis.
I know, right? These are false realities. These are false realities that are being created.
Correct. Let's talk about why it matters.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? By High Fidelity.
All right, first story this week in Why It Matters: fraud faster with Fintech. And this is based on a report that came out of the subcommittee on COVID-19 and financial technology, otherwise known as Fintech, actually allowed people to commit fraud faster. So, yay, technology. Good job. Except this leads to a whole line of companies who have allowed fraud to propagate across the internet. Financial tech with the PPP fraud. We know that crypto is a scam and a fraud. I don't know how many more things we need to point out to people. This is fraud.
Yeah.
And technology is bringing it to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Hi-Fi.
Well, yes, but it's not technology's fault, right? It's not the technology that's bringing you anything. It's the fucking asshole, and it's not even the software. So it's the fucking assholes who are being funded by bad actors, you know, by Russians or fascists or the Kochs or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And you know, and what you have to do, you know, Hi-Fi and Martin Shield and all of our people do, is go and look how these things are actually funded, because it matters, right? Look at Oracle. For example, which is everywhere. Oracle databases are everywhere, all connected, you know, and guess who is in charge of it? You know, a very, very right-wing, you know, operative, effectively. So, yes, technology can be wielded badly. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Oracle software. I've used it. But if you've got somebody who's running it that's, you know, just slightly less than Elon Musk in terms of being radical, you know, you got to wonder, where's my data? You know, then somebody else looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important. The point is, it's important when you make decisions about your own life in terms of technology, when you, you know, look at what to sign up for, etc. Do a little homework and make sure you understand what the motivations of the people behind it are.
Yeah. And I'm going to guess everybody who's signed on, you know, an I accept button when they get new applications have never read it. Do you guys recall when the PP, you know, when the whole program first came out, the money was hoovered up in a couple of weeks by people who were already multimillionaire friends of Donald Trump? Like, you know,
I would remind our viewers also that the individual who was in charge of the Treasury at that time, Mnuchin, specifically stated that there would be absolutely no auditing of any PPP loans.
Yeah.
So
all their friends had a good time. So thank you for that.
Don't get me started on Mnuchin. Good Lord.
Yeah, I wanted to, you know, you said, Heidi, do people really read the things they click on when they sign up for stuff?
Not one.
And that actually leads us to our next story, because the EU just declared that Meta can't force users to agree to data collection. And the part of this process they are specifically referring to is when you go to Facebook and you put in your email and here's my username, and you got to accept our terms of service to create an account, right? And in that terms of service, they say, we're going to take all your data and we're going to sell it to whoever we want. We're going to use it for whatever we want.
Right.
The EU has said, yeah, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And that
Wow, that's
is
big.
brilliant.
Yeah, that's big. That could have an impact. Well,
Yes.
I look forward to you documenting, because the EU is among the organizations, the groups that are actually really focusing more intently on not only privacy protections, but they're also punitive criminal charges on those who actually commit online harm. So I want to basically see what they're doing and see what could be implemented here in America.
Yeah, the EU is leaps and bounds ahead of the United States when it comes to regulatory policy and technology. And I would also, as Alex Winder reminded us, it's not that there is slow movement, it's that there is no movement.
Right.
And a large part of that is due to the lobbying that the tech companies do to keep themselves wild and free.
Right.
And speaking of the EU, that leads us to our final story for the week.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I got the segues today, man. I'm telling you. Anyway, final story this week is we could be heroes. Ha! I made a joke. Sorry. Turns out that a vice president of the European Union Parliament, Greek socialist MEP Eva Kaili, I'm sure I butchered her name. I apologize. But she has been taken into custody having to do with a bribery plot for influence that in the DW article is an unnamed Middle Eastern country, but has recently come out that it was Qatar. 600,000 euros were seized in multiple places throughout Brussels and Belgium. And we've been talking about a global plot to overthrow democracy on both the left and the right. It's not just the fascists, it's also some who would call themselves socialists.
Well, this is still under investigation, so we don't know how everything's going to play out. But that was what Jim is always talking about, and Brent Allpress is always talking about, is the horseshoe. That is the horseshoe.
Right.
But let's see how things play out, because
I mean, yeah, it could be an option. It could be. You never know.
We brought up Qatar. We've got a couple of things. So the broadcaster at the World Cup died.
Yeah.
In Qatar after being detained a couple weeks ago, for wearing a rainbow shirt.
Yeah.
That was in favor of LGBTQ plus rights.
Right.
So we don't know what happened, but he was a healthy 48-year-old man who dropped dead during a soccer broadcast. And if we recall, also our friend Peter Tatchell,
yes,
protested for the exact same reason, for LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah.
And I think we need to take that very seriously when we're talking about who our friends and allies are.
Right.
I would also remind people.
Also, I'll just drop the name Jared Kushner. And,
there we go. There it is. Because
that's where you were headed.
Trump orchestrated the blockade of Qatar.
Yeah.
Jared Kushner went over, got a bunch of money, and then suddenly the blockade disappeared.
So Jim brought up a really good point. It's very important that people go watch our episode with Peter Tatchell, learn about what 55 years of protesting on behalf of human rights and gay rights is all about and what it looks like. And this man was so brave. He went to, before the World Cup, he went to, Qatar and, was arrested, detained, deprived of having anything to drink in very, very intense heat. And I think that they weighed what it would look like if something happened to him, and they released him, just like they did in Russia when he was detained in Moscow for the same reasons. But, the West enables these types of countries and administrations over Petro. And once again, I'm looking at the young people. We need you to be what moves the needle on how we move forward, in the future. So pay attention.
Hellscape.
Jim Stewartson's hellscape. Oh, fuck.
So, I hinted a little bit about what I want to talk about today. I don't know how else to describe this, but a national emergency, an international emergency. I wrote a piece, and I'll be talking about it in a minute, where I renamed who I was calling Elmo before. I'm calling him now Q a lot, and the reason for that is not to just call him names. It's that he is, and I mean this literally, turning into Q, right? But instead of it being on 8chan, which had hundreds of thousands of users, he's now doing it on fucking Twitter with hundreds of millions of users. So it's the same exact operation, and I mean that literally,
I know you
but
do.
1,000 times larger. That's what's going on right now. From 8chan, with just those few 100,000 people, came the entire alt-right. So I was planning on talking about this story before, and then this happened, and you can just see the numbers just flying. Look at that shit.
Oh my God.
My pronouns are prosecute Fauci. That, I mean, I don't want to say this, but you got to hand it to him. That is a very, very efficient and despicable piece of propaganda. In 5 fucking words, he's validated targeting an 80-year-old man, a hero. He's being transphobic and making fun of the idea that people might have pronouns that are meaningful to them. He's displaying sociopathy that you see on Poll, which is, the infamous 4chan, 8chan board where, neo-Nazis would run around and say the most despicable possible shit they could. The scale of this is just shocking. He's going to pass over 1 million likes soon on this unbelievable piece of propaganda that anywhere on any reasonable social media site would get you banned instantly. What fucking world are we in where this is now not only mainstream, it's a captive audience. He's shoving this in their face, that this is normal, that this is okay. This is an emergency. This man is, if I don't believe in good and evil, but if I did, that's evil. That is intentionally using psychology, using every weapon he possibly can, his billions of dollars, all of his contacts, everything he's built around for this moment. He's been building this fucking empire so he can do this. So he can turn on a dime and laugh in our face. This person needs to be stopped. This entire operation needs to be shut the fuck down. Now things get spicy. What the fuck? I have written a lot about 8chan. I know a lot about 8chan. I have been tormented for 2.5 years by the guy who invented 8chan. I know what this fucking website is. I know who built it. I've been tortured by it. This is what Elon Musk is doing. He is turning it into 8chan. And what was the end result of 8chan? What's the end of this fucking movie? Mass murder by brainwashed neo-Nazis. That was the goal of 8chan, and it was successful. And now Elon Musk is taking that model and building it 1,000 times larger. Do you know anything about network effects? A network 1,000 times larger is not 1,000 times more powerful. It is orders of magnitude more powerful. He's creating a nuclear propaganda bomb that has the potential of tearing us apart. And I mean that with all seriousness and sincerity. It is an international emergency what's going on there. Just briefly, here's the guy who invented 8chan. And regardless of my personal feelings about this guy who's been tormenting me forever, the Daily Stormer is the website that he used to bring Nazis to 8chan during Gamergate. This guy, after he invented 8chan, it wasn't extreme enough. It was gamers and trolls and 4chan. He wanted Nazis. So he wrote a fucking article in the Daily Stormer. The editor of the Daily Stormer's name is Andrew Anglin. Andrew Anglin was banned 10 years ago, or 9, from Twitter. It was hard to get banned then. And Elon Musk brought the editor of the Daily Stormer back on Twitter so he could say stuff like, saying you love Hitler is not even a big deal. No one cares about that. He let Baked Alaska, fucking Tim Giannette, who grew up in Russia, who is a neo-Nazi Kremlin asset and has been literally his entire life. You let this guy back on. Transphobic, misogynistic, sickening LARP. A grifter who pretends to be God, and incels and weak, sad boys latch onto him and give him all their money thinking they're going to be like this. That's who QAnon wants back on his fucking website. This is the richest man in the world, maybe second richest now, because he's fucking up Tesla real bad. He's literally signaling Heil Hitler to everybody on the right. Everybody knows what that means. He's signaling Heil Hitler. He's using 4chan, 8chan iconography to do it. Those are Wojak memes that come from 4chan. There is no reason for him to say 88 million years from now. And just in case you don't believe me, he says it himself. This is a Pepe. Only people of culture can see it. I added the racist so nobody missed the point. He knows exactly what he's fucking doing. Laura Logan, Eric Prince's propagandist, who's on the board of Mike Flynn's America Future Project, doing child trafficking propaganda. Pizzagate. Guess who else is starting with the Pizzagate again? Mike fucking Flynn. And let's just be super clear. Here he's promoting Assange and Snowden being pardoned, and somehow engineered this to be 80% yes. Look, he's been doing these Twitter files things, right? Which is just WikiLeaks mixed with Q. Literally, Matt Taibbi, who's a Kremlin propagandist, just check this situation out. You have Matt Taibbi, the Kremlin propagandist, who Elon Musk gave all of Twitter to, literally. He gave him the console so he can go through all the emails and go through anybody's account. They gave us pictures of it. So this Kremlin propagandist is typing out all this lib-owning bullshit. And in the official conversation about it is Ian Miles Chung, who's a neo-Nazi propagandist who works with Adam Moffat, the very, very dangerous right-wing propagandist, and Tom Fitton, who's the executive director of the Council for National Policy. They're in there doing play-by-play and calling the tweets drops. There is no difference at all between this and Gamergate and QAnon and Pizzagate and all of these fucking psyops, except now it's 1,000 times bigger. And all of the blue checks are involved. That's why he's engineering all of this, all of the blue checks, and how he's shedding all of the people that don't have cult-like attachment to him. That's why he's shedding all of those things and building this monster. Yoel Roth is the man who banned me from Twitter as head of Twitter safety, and allowed me to be tormented for 2.5 years on Twitter before, I don't know what happened. He claims that he quit. But Yoel Roth does not deserve to be smeared as a pedophile in front of 120 million people. He does not deserve to have his life threatened or his kids threatened. And that's what Elon Musk did. Because Yoel Roth was not sufficiently loyal to him. So he took some old thesis of Yoel Roth, totally mischaracterized it, and painted him as some kind of pedophile. Completely false. But he did it to 120 million people who are following him and hundreds of millions more everywhere else who are watching. 132,000 tweets about this guy. A guy who hurt me deeply. This is not okay. We can't, no matter who it is, we cannot be the people who allow this, who think this is all right. Look, This is a little bit emotional. I'm sorry if I'm being kind of serious here, but this can't be okay. We have got to figure out a way to make this not okay again.
We are so excited to introduce you guys to Professor Matthew Bodie. He is a professor, an English professor who specializes in rhetoric from a relatively small Georgia college, but he has a big presence on Medium where he has made it a mission to debunk every single thing that comes out of Charlie Kirk's mouth. He is probably the nation's foremost expert on Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk and all of the propaganda and active measures coming out of that organization, which sadly, as I referenced earlier, is the fastest growing organization on college campuses in America, which is why this interview with Professor Bodie is so incredibly urgent. So let's bring him in. Hey.
Hey there.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I did a little intro. If you'd like to add anything to it, go for it. And then we're going to start firing away some questions here.
I'm always happy to talk about Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, most people would say that's a bad thing.
Excellent. Okay, so the most important thing I think for our viewers to know is that you were going about your life. I know that you stumbled across, Charlie Kirk and what he was up to. I believe you wrote an op-ed, and suddenly you're getting calls from people saying that you are on the Turning Point USA professor watch list. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you were the first professor on this watch list. Can you tell us about that?
Well, they put out an initial list, probably about 100 or so, and I was on that list. I wouldn't say I would rank first at all, but yes, it was on the initial list, mainly because of an op-ed that I wrote against guns on campus, a law that has now passed in Georgia allowing people to carry concealed weapons on college campuses. And as you know, gun rights or uses of guns is a Turning Point issue. And so I'm sure they found my op-ed through other means. I think they actually found it through Campus Reform, another, conservative college thing, and just linked it to their website. And there I was, and nobody knew who I was, and nobody knew who Turning Point was, and now we're together.
Wow. And so I know that you're looking at three maniacs right here. We are relentless in our pursuit of truth and exposing those putting out disinformation. You yourself have joined the team as far as how focused you are on exposing the truth behind essentially the lies that they promote. Can you tell us how that started?
When the watch list came out, I was like, who is this group? And my university was like, just ignore it, it'll go away. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that for a while. But then, Charlie Kirk got in with President Trump, and it just skyrocketed from there. And it kept adding people. And then a bunch of professors, pleaded with them to go ahead and add them. It became a free speech issue. And I just started reading what they were into, and finally decided maybe I should write something. So I went and found Charlie Kirk's original origin story editorial. He wrote an editorial in April of 2012 as a high school student for Breitbart. It was about a textbook they were using in one of the classes in his high school, and it was littered with misinformation, but it was the thing that got him on Fox News and then got him on Fox News again. So it was his starting point, and I wanted to see how he started. And really from that, it's been just a slew, a river, a typhoon, a hurricane of misinformation since then. But I started there and have collected a lot of op-eds and things he's written. It's kind of hard to keep track of everything that comes out of his mouth, and he repeats himself a lot. But I've tried to find out what he's been saying and write about it rather regularly on my Medium site.
Fantastic. Guys, jump in.
Would you consider Charlie Kirk a propagandist?
Oh, certainly. I mean, ideology, propaganda, these are all things that go together. He's certainly very good at it, too. And that's often the sign of a propagandist, is they know how to use these propaganda techniques. He is a child of Twitter. He early on tried to do engagement with high-profile Twitter users like Donald Trump, urging him to run for president. But more, as he's had a platform, he's been using things like asking questions or putting these, wondering emojis at the end of his tweets. Those are sort of the online propaganda tweets. But also, it's as we say in rhetoric, implying the thing you want people to think, not saying it directly, and using dog whistles, yes, but really not stating the conclusion. And that's really a fine example of a rhetorical expert is leading you to a conclusion, but not stating it and letting you figure it out on your own. And that's really what he's good at.
Yeah. What do you think TPUSA's ultimate goal is? Right. And I don't mean their short-term political, operations. I mean, what do they actually want at the end? What is their end state?
I think that's changed over time. A lot of people have asked me, what does Charlie Kirk want to do with himself? And I thought maybe he might run for office, things like that. But I think now that Rush has died and Charlie Kirk has a radio show and is getting a better platform with Salem Radio Network, I think he wants to be the next Rush because he realizes how powerful Rush Limbaugh was. So Turning Point USA was the vehicle for that. And it has branched off into several other organizations. I call them now a media empire. So he is the king of a media empire. So Turning Point USA is one part of that empire. So I wouldn't say what does Turning Point USA want to be, because we have Turning Point Faith and Turning Point Action. It's what Charlie Kirk wants out of his brand. And I think he wants to be the next Rush, perhaps on steroids, not just a radio person, but have all these other things. I mean, you could talk about the ways in which he influences politics, influences policy, influences the Republican Party. But he wants a wide net that he casts. So whatever Charlie wants is what Turning Point's going to get.
And the objective of that platform is to further radicalize people to these extremist beliefs. I was sent, I don't know why, randomly, I had a Turning Point USA email in my inbox a few months back, and every single propagandist, extremist buzzword was planted every sixth word, whether it was woke, CRT, whether it was, gender issues, whether it was Marxist, socialist, communist. It was like blah, 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 Jesus, blah, 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 woke, Jesus. But blah, 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 CRT, blah, blah, blah. And so for me, I found that very alarming because I recognized it as professional propaganda. There was also the repetition element, which I also found alarming. But clearly, this is a radicalization media empire.
Certainly, yeah. So he has a wide range of demographics that he goes after. Obviously, college students was the original one. They're in high schools now. He has Turning Point Faith, which is in churches. And Turning Point Action, which involves obviously people who are interested in politics. So he has a wide range of things that he goes after, and is, like I said, very good at that rhetorical skill. But I would say that it now has a more concise message or plan or propaganda than it did in the beginning. In the beginning, as I point out on my 10-year history, he was into free markets and market economy and limited government and the national debt. Now he's into Christian nationalism, and that allows him to focus way more on different groups, but make that message more concise. And I think that is the thing that he wants out of Turning Point USA. To answer your question, he wants it to be the leading Christian nationalist media empire, perhaps like the old ones, like the Moral Majority, but in a Twitter age on steroids.
Okay.
Have you? Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between TPUSA, Charlie Kirk, and the Council for National Policy?
Yeah, Ann Nelson's done a good job on that. I mean, it's a secretive group, the CNP, and of course they are where the big donors are, and they do a secretive work. So Charlie Kirk has gotten invited to that, and he's spoken there several times. He is a big draw for a dinner and a fundraiser, but compared to that group, he is still pretty minor. But because he's a rising star, they want him in that group. So I would say that getting him in that group is part of rewarding him for what he's done, but also giving him just another network of donors, another network to spread his message. And of course, they obviously already agree with him, but the policy apparatus of getting legislation done. That's where he hasn't had a lot of success yet, getting people elected to office. And that CNP is just going to allow him to do that.
Wow. I do know that one of his big donors, I did an interview with Ann Nelson, multiple interviews, but one of them showed the money coming in from Council for National Policy to Turning Point USA. And there are the usual suspects of fossil fuel donors. And can you illuminate for our audience, why would fossil fuel industry be interested in a group that is effectively radicalizing young people on school campuses?
Well, I mean, Charlie Kirk has always been anti-climate change, anti any type of just saving the environment. Of course, Foster Price, one of his early donors, was into fossil fuels. So they want to somehow reach the youth, which is every organization's dream, is to keep that new generation coming. And he is the youth whisperer as much as he was now the church whisperer for the evangelical vote. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're seeing his success on campus, these numbers of chapters and numbers of organizations that he has, and they just want to tap into that. He's always been agreeing with them on that issue. He hasn't promoted his anti-science as much, or anti-climate change as much. He's been anti-science, but that's just another link for him. He's always been in
It's
that
so
category.
frightening, because it's the youth who are going to save us, and they're going to save us because they realize we have failed on climate issues. So that is where and the other thing I want to say is that I've been talking to teachers throughout America who've been terrorized by many of these types of operations. And their concern is that the Turning Point USA now has field directors that they pay to go out and proselytize.
Oh no, this is I mean, they went on a hiring spree in the last year because they started Turning Point USA Faith. And these field directors, yes, are paid staff members who then go recruit and manage the chapters on college and high school campuses. And so their job is to put on events and bring speakers in and create buzz about different things. So yes, they have a wide network of field directors, both state-based and region-based, and they pay them well, in which they travel a lot. I've met several here in Georgia. Yes, but their goal is to get TPUSA on any platform they could find. And that's really the way in which TPUSA has changed. It used to be just Charlie Kirk going to events, but now he doesn't have to go to everything. And they have these wide network of influencers, and they can go to these regional conferences they have. Of course, they have the annual event they have in Arizona every year. So there is money to burn. The TPUSA itself was $55 million, but then you have TP Action and TP Faith, which has separate money organizations. I mean, it could be $100 million organization if you count all the things that he's involved in.
Oh my God.
Can you just, for the audience, just describe a little bit? You're on a college campus, right? TPUSA is going to target this campus. How do they recruit somebody on that campus? And once they do, what does that mean, right?
Okay.
Great
If
question.
they successfully sort of pulled you into the organization, what is that person then exposed to? What are they asked to do?
I mean, the basic way that any college group organizes on campus is has a table, out on the quad, and you walk by and, hey, can I talk with you for 5 seconds? And they've had these events that generate crowds. One famous one is the free speech ball. They have this huge beach ball, and you can write whatever you want, and they take down your information. They've had a series of events like that on college campuses. And there are a certain percentage of students that will gravitate toward that group, mainly because they already agree with them. So if you've signed up for their email list, or you've posted on Facebook or agreeing with them, they're going to find you and ask you to be a member of their chapter, or if they don't have one, to organize one. At my school, they've had a chapter here and there come and go, because it doesn't really get started and maintain itself. But really, if it's a person walking up to your table and already agreeing with you, you're going to get their information, you're going to take it down, and that field director is going to contact you. Hey, let's talk about starting a chapter here. And the one thing that they are really good at, and sometimes it doesn't go as well, but really is get that person's social media and their brand online to be clean. And I mean clean, on message with Turning Point USA, and not filled with things that, would draw attention to their badness. They've had an example of that recently.
Wow.
So it's really, as any organization would do, is bring you in, show you what you could do, give you power in which to do it. And then that campus person, that chapter leader, is going to do another tabling, another event, and then they'll bring in, they have a long list of approved speakers and influencers they'll bring into your campus, and eventually you'll work your way up to having Charlie Kirk. I've been to 2 of his campus events at UGA down the street. You know, so when your chapter gets that big at UGA, and it was the biggest in the state, they'll bring in the heavy hitters and just gravitate you more up the ladder.
So this sounds like cult dynamics. Okay, hi-fi, sorry. I just want to point that out. This sounds like Scientology. This sounds, you know, Jim is a brilliant writer in his own right and an analyst on all this disinformation, you know, all these operations. And he wrote something amazing last week about how so many of the leaders of these movements and the rhetoric that they put out, they know how to target the soft spots in people's heads.
Oh, certainly.
And so I think when you have grown up perhaps in a very, you know, religious household, maybe evangelical family, you know, you hear what they're saying and it kind of has that warm, fuzzy intro feeling to you, and then boom, they're in. That's what it sounds like.
I mean, the thing about cults is they bring you in and eventually they give you the secrets. Turning Point doesn't quite work like that. It's an ideology. You know what you're getting from the beginning in terms of their beliefs, but it's the celebrity nature of it that gets you keeping going. I mean, because you come in with a field director and you meet someone, and eventually you're invited to this regional thing, and then you're invited to Arizona, and then you become taking pictures with Charlie Kirk, and then you're hanging out with 1,000 of your friends. It's the celebrity factor of it, I think, that makes it draw. Yeah.
Wow. It's also sort of MLM, like multi-level.
That's
marketing.
what I was going to say. That's what it just sounded like.
You know, so you can look at something like Amway as a cult or MLM, or you know what I mean. But the dynamics are similar, I think, is Heidi's point. And I think you're right that it's different in the sense that it's not like Scientology where you get to, you know, chapter 15 or whatever, and you get the secrets of the alien species, or you know. But there is a leveling up thing. There's a gamification of the process, which appeals to young people, I think.
Hi-Fi, you're going to jump in. I just really quick, I want to ask you, is it like, do the people who then become a part of this, are they also then responsible for trying to bring in new recruits or bring in money? Because so many of these, when you look at it, they actually use their own people in the field to actually bring in more people and get money, or is that not the point?
The field directors mainly do events and organizing on campus, and the students they recruit to be chapter leaders use TPUSA money to do all these events, or sometimes they apply for student government money. They don't need to raise their own money because there is a
they're bankrolled. All right, Hi-Fi. Sorry about that, man.
Okay, so you just mentioned.
The Hi-Fi is speaking.
You just mentioned badness. And I would like to say that TPUSA really likes to hammer home. Look at all these liberals indoctrinating people, and look at all these groomers. And I would posit that this is an accusation in a mirror, given the fact that Adam Hageman was just sentenced to prison for some very, very serious charges. He is related to Ruben Versatagui, who is also going to prison for very serious charges. These were Charlie Kirk's right hand. You know, Adam was Charlie Kirk's right hand man. And you look at Minnesota, where they just had the college Republicans. The head of that, there is a legal case involving sex trafficking.
Wow.
Tell us about the badness.
Wow.
Well, I would say that anytime you get thousands of high school and college students together at a hotel or at an event, you're going to need some supervision. And TPUSA has not been good on supervision, which is why if you look at the invites and the applications to their events now, these Arizona events, look, you could bring your adults, you could bring your parent for an extra $75, especially if you're under 18. That has totally been a response to, I'm sure, anecdotal information, rumors about sending your kids off to this event and not really knowing what was going to happen. Yes, there's obviously been some people that has done some terrible things, who have worked for Turning Point USA. But at the same time, there's many more people who, don't get into that. So I don't want to say that they're all bad, but at the same time, yes, the supervision is probably an issue that they're well aware of. And so they've been trying to bring adults in, not only that, but bring these faith people in, bringing the worship Sunday morning of their weekend event. So trying to bring a bit more morality to their events.
Yeah, sounds terrifying to me, actually.
Except here's my problem. Given the issues that have occurred in multiple religious organizations, how are these better supervisors?
Yeah. So you think that, again, back to, we've had decades of conservative groups trying to be involved in politics, and Turning Point USA is reinventing the wheel in many regards for that. But they're making some of the same mistakes that those groups made. I think that, again, part of it is the draw, the celebrity draw, the freedom, the college kid, the high school kid doing things that they wouldn't normally do. And so that is going to cause some issues. I think that you don't have a lot of yet, but you may here soon have a lot of, insider, here's what I saw, here's the video secretly, of whatever they had. I haven't had that quite yet, and I think that's because they've stepped up their game on security, on having people around, like Charlie Kirk. His events have security, so I think that they're not quite yet until the unmasking of what might go on at a Turning Point USA. But they're getting more attention. They're getting more media attention. So eventually, you would think something would come up, but they've been good at keeping the stories to be anecdotal stories, or to be limited at this point.
Well, that's fascinating. Go ahead, Jim.
Can you talk about the relationship between Charlie Kirk, TPUSA, and Bannon and his network? Because I've been especially after this last election, I was watching a lot of the kind of post-election or election coverage. Yeah. And Bannon and Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec are all basically a team at this point.
Yeah.
Which is pretty high up in the propaganda chain. Right. And I just wanted to get your feedback on what that relationship is like.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Bribery gave Charlie Kirk a start. So he not only just loyal to them, but they agree on so much. And obviously, Bannon's connected to Bribery. What is interesting, I think, that is, while they will agree on the radio or on their video of the rhetoric that they're talking about and go as far as Bannon goes with all his words, there's moments where Charlie Kirk will step back. And one of them is January 6th. And I don't mean that he doesn't think that, it was great, but he didn't go. He didn't go to the rally. He didn't speak at the events, though they helped pay for it. And so it was a moment where I think somebody convinced him that this would be a bad thing for your organization. I don't know who that was. I don't know if that was actually happened. But at the same time, he will continue on with the rhetoric that will lead to January 6th again, right? Misinformation, the big lie, all that. So I think they have a tie that goes back years. They have a tie, obviously, with donors and audience, and they have a tie with what they believe in. But there are moments where Charlie Kirk seems to understand that we can't go to the insurrection. I mean, you can imagine that if he spoke at that rally, if he went up, Bannon obviously didn't go himself either. But what I'm getting at is that he could have gone and he could have spoken at that rally. And I think that would have changed how we view TPUSA. And I think that Charlie, it's kind of like with the gropers, if I can bring that back up, right? When he was harassed and,
yeah, that's really interesting. I read your piece about that, and it's very fascinating.
Right. So they only had him on one issue, which was immigration, and he eventually apologized and went far right. So he's obviously there with Bannon on all those issues. But it had an impact, and I think that it had an impact with his audience. And I think that he saw perhaps what he knew was going to happen, which we all kind of guessed was going to happen at January 6th, and says, I don't want to physically be in that. I mean, he said he wanted to show it to us on radio or show it to us on a video, but he could have been there. And I think that was a moment where he stepped back from that.
I just wanted to unpack real quick. Groypers, right, are in a neo-Nazi cult,
yes,
led by Nick Fuentes,
right?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what's important here, I think, is Charlie Kirk, radical already, right? Radical Christo-fascist guy. And the neo-Nazi cult led by Nick Fuentes got him to change his
immigration
his policy on immigration to be more neo-Nazi.
So crazy.
So I just think this is a very clean and interesting example of how it works, right? How the most radicalized all the way to Hitler worshiping groypers actually affect people who are relatively in the mainstream. I mean, this guy's all over the goddamn country, right?
Yeah, I know. So January 6th is a good example of him stepping back and saying, I don't want to, be in that picture. The same example happened, I think 6 months ago, maybe it was a year ago, when at one of his events in Idaho, and some guy gets up and says, when are we going to use the guns? And Charlie Kirk, for all his gun rhetoric, says, no, this is not the time. We shouldn't be doing that.
It's just not the time. We're not ready yet.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't say no.
Stand back and stand down, right?
It's very scary to me.
So he understands his donor base. He understands what would take them away from his group and what would keep them donating. And I think that he understood that violence, and he says himself, violence isn't the answer. But at the same time, he uses rhetoric that leads all the way up there, which is what I pointed out, right? He keeps saying the thing that gets that question asked. And then when it's asked, he goes, well, I didn't have anything to do with it. So that's his play. He steps back at the last moment.
Wow.
Plausible deniability, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So he needs a little bit of that. Bannon doesn't need that shit. He's already a convicted felon. He's, I have no idea how that guy is still free, by the way.
Yeah, he's in it for the revolution. Charlie's still in it for the grifting.
So what scares me about what you're saying is that there are a number of things. One, you pointed out that the professor blacklist, which smacked of McCarthyism, actually put Turning Point USA on the map.
Certainly.
So that's one data point, as Hi-Fi would say. Then he's a Fox baby, right? So he gets all of the exposure on a propagandist, an extremist propagandist network. And so much of what I have looked at as I read through your deciphering of his work and his rhetoric is very much echoes the Russian propaganda that we here study. And so what is horrifying to me is that this seems like a very smart operation.
Oh yeah. He's very good at what he does. Let's not discount that. We can make fun of him. We can mock him. We can say he's wrong. We can say he has terrible effects.
He's got a giant forehead and he looks like a big.
I try not to get into making fun of people's physical effects.
Me too.
He's very good at what he does, and I think he has good advisors. I don't know who these people are, but that tell him, these are the ways. I mean, his mentor, right? Bill
I think
McGovern,
those are a lot of those are the CMP.
The CMP, yes.
I think that he's been a member of that, since he was
our friend Brent got their membership, catalog and data, and there was Charlie Kirk there, nice photo, and so
like executive director of junior division or some shit.
Terrifying. But no, so this goes back.
All right, my turn. My turn.
Well, but let him finish let him finish though, because where you were saying is whoever's advising him, this is a very, very focused, directed, intelligent operation.
I think that whoever's advising him sees it as a business with audience and donors, and you don't want to turn away those people. And honestly, the recruiting of the college kids becomes a side effort, a kind of what do we spend our money on? But also, whomever convinced him, and it could be Rob McCoy, the pastor, to go into churches during the pandemic was brilliant. I mean, because he couldn't get on college campuses where his bread and butter was. So where does he go? Where his alumni are, where the Turning Point alumni who grew up to be in their 20s go to church, and that's where they are. But I think, he has made some great moves, if you will.
Oh my God. Okay, Hi-Fi.
All right. So this may be a little out of your area, but Senator Whitehouse, with his Disclose Act, talked a lot about 501c3 organizations paired with 501c4 organizations and how they switch the dirty money and switch the people back and forth, and everything was connected. Turning Point USA has Turning Point Action, which is a 501c4. Have you seen, or do you feel there may be evidence of financial malfeasance between these two groups?
I haven't seen any evidence, and here's why I think they're good at what they do, so they wouldn't have that, but that's just a guess. One, Turning Point USA headquartered in Arizona, the official records of Turning Point Action still headquartered in Indiana, so they keep them separate. That said, it's hard to separate a group that was founded by one person, which is Charlie Kirk, right? So he doesn't have to come out and say every time, this is just my personal opinion, but we know that whenever he talks, he is both speaking for both organizations. Now, Turning Point USA did get into some minor trouble, I think, when Charlie Kirk was like, body man for Donald Trump Jr. during the 2016 campaign, because they tried to get Turning Point USA staffers to help with that campaign.
Okay.
And I think they saw that and go, oh, we have to be a bit more, walls between them. That said, obviously the donor base for both of those groups is the same.
Oh my God.
And they can donate, at the limit to both groups. So they're doubling their donation. So there's no reason for them to double dip or to mesh those finances. They're getting it for both groups, and they're getting it for both purposes. Obviously Turning Point USA, college kids and high school kids, and then Action being the politics. So I haven't seen any financial mangling, and the forms that come out show they are separate. But at the same time, that's a thin wall, and a lot of people will say, what is Turning Point doing endorsing candidates? Not Turning Point endorsing candidates, it's Charlie Kirk endorsing candidates. So it's very thin wall, but that is the system we have, and they're good at playing the system.
So they've hacked the vulnerabilities of our system.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing that, Hillary Clinton tried to make Trump answer for those, and he said, well, you could have changed the laws. I'm just playing by the laws. Well, that's
yeah.
So that makes me think, what time is it for? Maybe it's time to change the laws. Just a thought.
We need deep structural reforms. We know this, which is why it would have been really nice if we could have hung on to the House.
I mean, think about how long it took for us to discover that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA paid for Kimberly Guilfoyle's speech at the rally on January 6th. I think it's like 6 months by reporting with the Washington Post. Like if we had donor lists and things like that, we would have found that out much sooner.
Wow. So my question to you, I've got two quick questions because I know we're running out of time and the guys probably have a couple more things. One is, we're all parents here. And obviously you do this work because you must have concerns about the impacts that Turning Point USA is having on young people in America.
Yes. It's hard to know, what impact they're having. He tries to make it out more than it really is. I think I am concerned about not my child at the moment, but the people who might teach my child later on. My child's 2, so it's going to be a few years. But the people who will teach that child, or your child, or any other child, or the lesser number of people who will do that in the public school system. I'm interested in defending the public school system, being an employee of it. So I think that the more impact they have in these different groups, the more I, in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, is affected by it. I don't think my college students know who this group is. Some of them might. They certainly are aware of Charlie Kirk. I would say that they have money to burn, and they're going to burn it building these networks. And so if that continues at the rate that it has continued, because it was, phenomenal under Trump, then that is scary. But, when they're in the minority, sometimes it doesn't work as well. But I think that it will only grow, and it will only get bigger, and the money will only go, to this group in higher and higher amounts. So I'm concerned about the institutions they attack. Certainly.
Okay, so that's why it's very important that we direct people to your work so they can see exactly note for note what's been going on here. My next question is, you probably more than anybody have been really watching Charlie Kirk. What is it about him that should be of concern to those who wish for liberal democracy to continue in America?
I think the main thing, of course, is his turn to Christian nationalism, which isn't just a historical claim about founding of America. It is about what the church and Christianity should be for the government now. Okay. He wants to elect more people that agree with him. Everybody wants to do that. But he wants to make the church, perhaps as an institution, the moral handmaiden to the government, that we should be passing more church-based laws. I mean, he was for gay marriage. Now he's against it. He was for some sort of drug liberalizing laws before as a libertarian-ish person. Now he's against it. So you can see where this is going. He's always been anti-abortion. But what I'm getting at is that as long as he can throw money at doing these type of policies, the worse it will get. And he's doing it in a theocratic way to build a theocracy, perhaps a pluralistic theocracy in the sense there are many churches. But that
was my next question.
Yeah, he is the whisperer to all the groups that Republican elected officials want. And so he becomes a kingmaker if he keeps on the way he's doing.
Oh my God. Jim?
So in terms of a theocracy, right, it's obviously a Christian nationalist movement. But Christianity is a very, very large and broad spectrum of beliefs, right? There's, Jesus is in there somewhere, but you have Catholics and Presbyterian, does he have a specific brand of Christianity that he is trying to kind of pull everybody under? Is there, how do they deal with the Catholic Church as opposed to, other Christianity?
Well, I mean, he will take allies where he can get them. So he has become an ally of, we'll say, radical Catholic organizations that agree with him on certain issues. He's done some interviews with Church Militant, I think is the name of the
Church
group.
Militant is bad news. That's got viral now.
Right. And of course, his particular brand of Christianity, you might call it white evangelicalism, but it's even more specific than that. It is the Seven Mountains Dominion.
Oh, wow.
And that's new to him.
Wow, that's terrifying.
But at the same time, it has both a broad appeal, a broad prophecy about its own worth, but it is still a minor part of white evangelicalism, which is a minor part of the total church. So there's hope there, but there's also the claim upon or by that particular part of the religion is huge, right? The dominions, the Seven Mountains. We want to take over all of these. And it's done in different ways in different places, but the partner or the churches he has partnered with do that.
Boy, that sounds so familiar, doesn't it, Jim?
It is.
Boy, does that sound so familiar.
Yeah, no, Seven Mountains is it's more or less it's an organization of ideas designed to take over the world, turn it into a theocracy, a one world religious government is its overt goal, right? This guy Lance Wellnow gets up on a whiteboard and says, "Here are the mountains that represent all of civilization. Yeah. Here's how we're going to take over each one of them."
Yeah.
And and he's involved in this whole.
I mean, Charlie Kirk's been on his show, but the new thing that Turning Point has started outside of Turning Point Faith is a Turning Point's Pastors Conference, right? So bringing in 100, 200 pastors, that's obviously a small number. But you got to start small, and if you're going after the pastor, that means you're going after his congregation.
We know
it is quite the network that they're trying to build there. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, so we only have like a minute or so left, and I would like you to tell our viewers who are global. Yes, high five. Of course, you get the last word. Tell our viewers who are global. What can we do? Because obviously, this show is about exposing what Turning Point USA is up to and what Charlie Kirk is up to and the networks that he's attached to and how these paid operations are impacting young people on campuses. But what is the antidote to this? What can we do?
I mean, I used to think that, better information is going to defeat bad information, but that isn't necessarily true anymore. Persuasion isn't always the thing that's going to work. So you both have to do that. Debunking websites, fact checking, all those things. But now we have to give money to, donate, support organizations that are going to do the opposite of Turning Point USA. Whether it is pro-democracy groups or if pro-democratic in terms of partisan groups, you need to build up institutions that can withstand the attacks or criticisms of Turning Point. So wherever they're at, you need to find a group that is doing something that is opposite them. I don't necessarily like the people that show up at Charlie Kirk events and try to question him, and because Charlie Kirk is going to burn you on camera, then he's going to place it on his website, edited in a way. So you could certainly try that, but it doesn't get anywhere other than you become a minor play in his story. So you have to build the groups and institutions that will do what he is opposing.
Thank you so much for that. Hi-fi.
My last question has to do with the creation of the organization and an individual named William Montgomery.
Oh, yeah, Bill Montgomery.
Because Will Montgomery was a member of the Tea Party, which was started by Rand Paul.
Yep.
And if you've watched any of our show or done any of reading on the Tea Party, we know that it was infiltrated by Russian agents and laundered Russian money into the American political system. Talk about that.
Well, yes, Bill Montgomery is this restaurant retired person from Chicago who found Charlie speaking at an event in the summer of 2012, right at the end of high school, and said, you got it, you're charismatic. I want to help you do stuff. And they started Turning Point USA. And it was Bill Montgomery going to Tea Party events. Hey, can Charlie have 5 minutes? And Charlie does the same speech, and it goes on. And it said, let's get out to Tampa. Let's get into RNC. And I won't go through the whole story. But what I want to point out is Bill Montgomery died in 2020 from complications of COVID. And I think that, and I really have no evidence, that's just my personal expertise, reading Charlie Kirk. I think that moment for Charlie Kirk was, I no longer have this mentor. I need another one. And who does he go find? Rob McCoy, or who does Rob McCoy notice first is Charlie Kirk. And the Christian Nationalism comes around that same time.
Wow.
I think that Bill Montgomery was a very savvy business operator, as you know, pushed Charlie Kirk to be the best one person he could be, and they built the organization with donors and things like that. But once Mr. Montgomery died, I think that Charlie Kirk said, I need a different mentor, a different type of person. And I think that whatever the money came from for the Tea Party, Charlie Kirk is no longer affiliated with the Tea Party. Like, he had Tea Party beliefs, and Tea Party wasn't necessarily one party, one partisan, even though they did a lot of different things. He has moved away from that into Christian nationalism, which is also connected to Russian money, but nonetheless, it's a different type of belief.
Wow.
My whole point with this is I wanted to show our viewers how these operations fold into each other. They amplify each other. They finance each other. That's the point.
If there's ever a Republican elected to the White House and they have another prayer breakfast, Charlie Kirk will be there, and Russian operatives will also be there.
You bet.
What a brilliant way to end the show. First of all, we are so grateful here to our teachers. I have 2 children who graduated on near full rides at top colleges because of teachers. And so we are a show that celebrates all our good educators, and we know they're under attack, and that's part of why we really wanted to do this show. The last thing I also want to say is we had Professor Jason Stanley on a few weeks ago. His specialty in philosophy is also rhetoric. So we are very grateful to those of you who are paying attention to the words. We're in an information war, and we could not do this work without you. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
No problem. Always happy to talk about
Thanks so much, Professor. That was great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, aren't we so lucky? Like, gosh.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Like
TPUSA is very, very bad news, and having somebody, really lay it out like that was great.
Oh my gosh, so great. So speaking of bad news, we got good news and bad news. The bad news is that we have members of Congress who are homophobes who have a platform, and that really is lousy. The good news is they have gay nephews. So we're going to now let the nephew of a Missouri congresswoman who was at the pulpit, using the bully pulpit to cry about, marriage equality, and her nephew is calling her out. And this is one of the wonderful things about our post-privacy world. Let's let him take us out.
Today, a United States Congresswoman, my Aunt Vicky, started crying because gay people like me can get married.
I hope and pray that my colleagues will find the courage to join me in opposing this misguided and this dangerous bill. And I yield back.
So, despite coming out to my aunt this past February, I guess she's still just as much as a homophobe.
Let's be clear. Obergefell is not in danger, but people and institutions of faith are.
Aunt Vicky, that's not right. Institutions of faith like religious universities are not being silenced. They're being empowered by the US government to discriminate against tens of thousands of LGBTQ students because of religious exemptions, but they still receive federal funding.
The bill's implications: submit to our ideology or be silenced.
It's more like you want the power to force your religious beliefs onto everyone else. And because you don't have that power, you feel like you're being silenced. But you're not. You're just gonna have to learn to coexist with all of us. And I'm sure it's not that hard.